Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University. And I am Mark Rozelle, and I'm proud to serve as the Dean of the Schar School. And we are very proud to host the Michael V. Hayden Center for the past now 6.5 years. I know many of you are Hayden Center regulars who attend a lot of these high-quality forums. And I always like to say, in an era of hyper-partisan politics, there's a need for these kinds of forums that provide informed analysis of the challenging issues of our time. We are strictly nonpartisan, non-ideological, and we care about good government, good public policy, wherever it comes from, regardless of party or ideology. The focus here is on the very complex issues of intelligence and security. And over the course of any academic calendar year, we have major policymakers, directors of federal agencies, leading political analysts leading these forums. Now, tonight's program is special as it brings together the emphases both of the Hayden Center and our Schar School Gender and Policy Center, directed by Professor and Associate Dean Bonnie Stabile, and a number of the board members of the Gender and Policy Center are here for this evening's event. So it's really great to see all of you here this evening, and I extend a warm welcome as well to the many people who have signed up for virtual participation in this program. I think many of you know before the pandemic we would fill this room, we would have to go somewhere else because the room wasn't big enough. But since we've offered the virtual option, we have a couple hundred people signed up to watch on our YouTube channel, and absolutely delighted. And by the way, they can ask questions too, and Larry Pfeiffer, the director of the Hayden Center, will be watching for your questions. So thank you for attending, and I hope to see you at future events here. And I now welcome to the stage the director of the Hayden Center, Larry Pfeiffer. Larry.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you all for coming out tonight. You had to probably fight the pollen to get here. I know I've been fighting the pollen to get here, so I apologize. My voice is even at a deeper register than normal, and I'll probably sneeze at least once tonight. As Mark described, we're the Hayden Center. We've been here 6.5 years. Our job is to help enlighten folks about how intelligence supports and sometimes doesn't support the policymaker through various national security crises and national security issues and concerns. We do that through these events. We put these events on several times a year. If you are interested in, if this is your first time attending tonight and you're interested in knowing about our events as we're planning them, go to our website, haydencenter.gmu.edu. And on the right-hand side, you can just put your email address, hit return, and you'll get email notifications about the events. And that's really all we use the email address for. We're not going to bother you with lots of other emails. We are live streaming the event, as Mark mentioned. We'll be putting a recording of that event on our YouTube channel, so it'll be there to refer to again in the future and for others to see who can't attend tonight. We are on social media, so if you're interested in following us, that would be lovely. If you're interested in commenting on our event as it happens tonight, please feel free to comment and use these handles and hashtags up here. That would be fantastic as well. We are out there on X, or Twitter, as most of us still like to call it, Facebook, LinkedIn, Threads, Mastodon, and Blue Sky. We're also on Post.News, but apparently they're going away. They didn't quite cut it, so they're going away. We are going to have a question and answer session as we proceed through the conversation tonight. David, our moderator, will let you know when it's time to line up for those in the audience here at the microphones in the aisles there. And then he'll just kind of go back and forth between the sides to let you get a chance to ask your questions of our wonderful guest. For those of you on YouTube, use the live chat function to ask your question. And as Mark mentioned, I'll be monitoring that, and we'll pull some questions from there as well. For those in the audience here in the auditorium, we're going to have a reception afterwards. It was originally intended to be on the plaza, but for some reason, Mother Nature decided to give us a real April evening instead of the warm April evenings we've been having lately. So it has been moved indoors. It'll just be in the lobby in the foyer of the auditorium here when we finish. So please do join us there. Tonight, we have an incredible guest with us tonight, a legend of the Central Intelligence Agency, Jonna Mendez. Jonna spent 27 years at CIA. She has put this book out in True Face. Hopefully you got a chance to get it ahead of time. If not, perhaps you can get it later after you hear tonight's event. But she tells the fascinating story of somebody who joined the CIA during the Cold War in basically a secretarial administrative position, but made her way through the bureaucracy, a very male-dominated bureaucracy, to attain the level of senior intelligence service, and led some of the more important and significant science and technology organizations we have at the agency. She was, late in her career, the Chief of Disguise, which has got to be one of the coolest sounding job titles anybody could ever have. Chief of Disguise, she, when you hear Chief of Disguise, you immediately kind of think of Mission Impossible and the guy kind of suddenly peeling the face off and, there he is, a whole different person. I won't confirm or deny whether that's actually true or not, and maybe Jonna will or won't, but besides the cool aspect of that, the other important thing to remember is how vital that kind of work is to the mission of a secret organization like CIA. Disguise, deception has to be done meticulously, has to be done perfectly, because if it's not, that person, be it an American officer of intelligence, or be it a foreign agent working for us on our behalf, could find themselves imprisoned, tortured, and or dead. So vital and absolutely critical and important work. And again, Jonna's going to talk about that tonight. Since she retired from CIA, she and her husband, who also led an incredibly illustrious career at CIA in a similar vein as she did, Tony Mendez, many of you have probably heard of Tony, they have been the authors of a handful of books. Some of them you've probably heard of, some maybe not. One was called Spy Dust. Another one was called Moscow Rules, both of them relating how it was to operate in areas like the Soviet Union during the height of the Cold War. Most famously, they wrote the book Argo, which talked about the operation to rescue a number of Americans who were in hiding in Iran in the days of the hostage crisis. Most of you probably know Argo more from the movie that won the Best Picture Oscar in 2013, and I'm sure she can tell some great stories to you tonight about that as well. She has spent a good amount of her time in her post-retirement as well consulting. She and her husband were founding board members of the International Spy Museum here in Washington, D.C., and were very actively involved in setting that museum up and helping them organize the displays they have. If you've not been to the International Spy Museum, highly recommend it. It costs money. It's a rare thing in D.C. to have a museum cost money, but it's worth every penny. Our moderator tonight is our senior fellow, David Priess. David is the Director of Intelligence at Bedrock Learning, which is a national security training technology company. He is also the co-host of a podcast called Chatter that is operated by the Lawfare website. He is the author of two books. One, most germane to us, is The President's Book of Secrets, which looks at the President's Daily Brief through its history. He had a great time researching and writing that book. And if you've not read that, hop on Amazon, order the book, and get it. And I'm sure we can come to another event when David's here and get him to sign it. He was previously the publisher of Lawfare and the chief operating officer of the Lawfare Institute. Appears frequently on broadcast network media like CNN, MSNBC, writes for prominent publications like the Washington Post and others. And with that, I'll turn this over for a great conversation. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Larry. You all don't know it, but I'm so good as a master of disguise that I am Jonna Mendez, and this is David. Yeah. You made me look great. Yeah.
People are disappointed that I don't just rip it off and show you who I really am, but
It's so hurtful.
I know.
Right? They should love you for who you are.
I think so.
I do. So it's amazing in an era when we have a woman who's a director of national intelligence, as we do now. And we have had recently a woman as director of the Central Intelligence Agency, and women in all of the senior roles across CIA, the deputy director for intelligence, for operations, for science and technology. I could name all of them. To imagine that not that long ago, things were very different. And Jonna has told that story. She's told many stories before related to her work, but this time it's centered around a very personal one, which is her experience growing up in and around the Central Intelligence Agency and what it was like to navigate a very different culture than what's going on right now. So I want to walk through some of that and have you share some stories from the book and otherwise to illustrate these points. But I can tell you, having spoken to Jonna for many years about many things, that it's really a great opportunity for a conversation. So I'm going to encourage all of you who have anything interesting on your mind to don't be shy about getting to the mics, because we'll leave plenty of time for that conversation to be expanded here. But let me start a few years ago, and we won't count how many years, but it was more than 2, when you decided to start working at the Central Intelligence Agency.
Okay,
Yeah, I think it was more than 2.
it was.
What job did you do when you first started, and how typical or atypical was that?
I came on board as a contract wife. Some of you in this room would appreciate that. I married a CIA officer overseas. We were in Europe. And there was this funny little dance going on because we'd been dating for a while. And he wanted to propose, but he couldn't break his cover at the time. So he couldn't tell me when he proposed to me that he worked for the CIA. He couldn't really tell me, he thought, until after I said yes, and then he would tell me. Because there was the chance that I could say no. And then I could walk off into the mist knowing that he was an undercover officer. So I felt bad about that, but I did say yes.
You felt bad about that. Shouldn't he have felt bad about that?
Well, no, he just wanted to get married. He didn't feel bad about it at all. We got married in Switzerland, the Las Vegas of Europe, if you're ever thinking about marrying someone over there. Very little paperwork, very, very, still charming. But not too, the administrative part is easy. And then, of course, I wanted a job. I'd been working at Chase Manhattan Bank up to then, and I wanted to work for the American government. So as a wife of a staff officer overseas, they could hire me without going through the whole background check. They just went through part of it, and then I was a secretary. They opened the door, I went in, and I worked for logistics. Can you think of anything more? And my first job was, CIA had an around-the-world flight. I can't tell you any of the funny words that went with it, but it was like DHL. It was like FedEx, before FedEx and DHL. And it would stop. It had a regular kind of route, like Pan Am one. And it would pick stuff up and drop stuff off. It didn't take people, it took stuff. And my job was making sure that the manifests were right and that the plane was on schedule, blah, blah, blah. So while I'm in Europe, one of the people that my husband was working with doing CIA operations, he was being transferred to the Far East. He got out there, decided the beer wasn't nearly as good as the beer in Germany. And so he came back to his logistics people and said, send me beer. So they put 24 cases of beer on the plane. And he almost ruined it for the rest of us for all time. All the rules changed about what you could and could not put on the plane, but that was on my watch. That was the beginning of my career. 24 cases of beer.
And was it
really good beer?
Was it unusual for you to come in and be doing that work? Were women coming in as case officers and analysts and all these other positions, or was this more the norm?
If you were hired overseas like I was, you came in the very bottom rung. That was contract wife. That was actually a job description. And you could be, I don't know, a physicist back here in the States, but if you accompanied your husband overseas and you were his dependent wife overseas, they would hire you as a contract wife. Right. We had college grads, we had all kinds of people. That was overseas. Now back home in the States, if you walked in the door at Langley, the hiring process was a little different. They would hire you as a GS3 wife secretary, pretty much. We had all kinds of women come in the door back then, and this was a while ago. And you would start at the bottom rung. Jean Vertefeuille was hired as a very low level. She was in the typing pool. Most women came in to the typing pool, and then your assignment was to see if you could get out of there, to see if you couldn't find a professional piece of that organization where you could maybe start a career. And a lot of us did. A lot of us could, you meet people, you see something that looks interesting. You know, it's like any job scenario. but we always started way, way, way lower than men. And even with promotions, most women that I ever knew topped out around GS9 if they were lucky, and just couldn't go any further than that. Doing clerical, doing admin, doing logistics, doing stuff like that.
I want to talk a little bit about that process, but by which you left, typing and the secretarial work and got there, because it's a good news and a bad news story, right? The bad news is that it was systematically bad, and there wasn't a clear career path. There wasn't encouragement for you to do this at an institutional level. And yet, even in that culture, there were some people, largely men because they were managers, who said, wait a minute, I see that you could be doing something. You could be doing something more here. What was that like? Who were some of your champions, if you will? Who were the people who identified what you could do and then gave you some of the opportunities, like the photography classes, for one?
Well, I was a really good secretary. I mean, if I had needed a secretary, I would have hired me because I could. So I ended up rather quickly working for the director of my office. His name was David Brandwine. He was he had written the encyclopedia section on rockets and missiles. He was a very scientifically minded guy. And I have to say that the office that I worked in was basically the Q of CIA and kind of the intelligence agencies. Like Q in the James Bond movies, if you needed something, a piece of gear, a piece of equipment to do your job, to fulfill your operational requirements, you would come and see us. If you needed an audio bug, if you needed to bug somebody's office or anything, we bugged, oh God, we bugged everything. If you needed microdots, if you needed concealment devices, if you needed disguises, if you needed whatever you needed, you would come and see us. If we had it, we would probably issue it to you. If we didn't have it, we would probably invent it for you. Because at that time, our technical abilities were way ahead of the commercial market. We could do things that they hadn't figured out yet, like teeny tiny batteries, the ones today that are in your hearing aids and your watches. That battery technology kind of came out of our need for small, long-lasting, powerful batteries. So that's the office that I was in. Photography, we had all kinds of capabilities of photography that I could talk about separately, but I was an avid photographer working for the director of the office, bored out of my mind. And I could see, we were on Navy Hill across the street from State Department, and I could see the Smithsonian Castle building out my window. So my boss came out one day and I was looking longingly at the castle, and I said, I think there's a job for me somewhere over at the Smithsonian, something that would be interesting, something I could get my teeth into. And he said, this is my first really good boss before this. He said, well, don't do that. He said, don't go away. Take some of our photo courses. And we had incredible photo courses for our operations officers.
These were not typical photo courses like you would take at the neighborhood club. These were
No, they were not.
Very special courses.
So he signed me up for the first one. And it was, the name of the class was Airborne Platforms. Doesn't sound like a photo course, does it? I went south of DC, that little tarmac, little twin-engine plane. They had taken the doors off. There was a harness inside. It was my harness. And there was a Madonna kind of earpiece and a 35 millimeter camera, a film camera, of course, with a lens like this long. It's a 1,000 millimeter lens. And the airplane was me and the pilot. That was it. There was a guy on a ladder with a bucket of paint, and he was painting out the tail number before we took off. So you knew you were going to have a fun flight, right? And the goal of that class was to see if you could manage, if you could handle that lens. That lens all by itself wants to move. If you're in a 20-story building and you try and take a picture with that lens, you had to put it on a pillow to stop the motion of the building. It was so sensitive. And we flew around all day taking pictures of everything. There were some geese flying with us for a while. I said, how low can we actually fly? We're down. We're over the Chesapeake. I mean, I could almost stick my hand out, put water on my fingers. There was a pickup truck at one point going down some dirt road about 60 miles an hour. And I thought, well, I'll see if I can get his license plate through that dust. It was fun that day, taking the pictures. And then that night, we were at the farm, and they had all the safe lights on. So it's this red amber light. Somebody was playing big band music. And it was just me. It was just me. And I'm developing and printing. I already knew that part of photography. And I thought, gosh, if this is it, I'm going to stay here and see if I can't find a job in the photo section. And that's what I did. Our next overseas tour, I was in the dark rooms. We had a big, this was Europe again, big dark rooms. All the case officers are bringing us film. And I was the person on the other side of the door in the dark, developing the film, doing all of that. And I liked even that. That was the beginning of my photo career.
Yeah. So once you had the training, you were able to do the work. There wasn't a barrier at that point.
Well, you're always learning. You know, you may not be doing all the work, but you're watching, and all the photo guys, most of them Rochester Institute of Technology graduates, so they could talk about the emulsion, the toe curve of the film, the numbers. I never knew any of that. But we got to a point when the really important film would come in, like the tiny film from the Tropel pen, the really sensitive film from the sensitive operations. When it would come in, they would give it to me, because they discovered over time that I would like overcompensate for everything. I never lost a roll of film. I never got what we call a Purple Heart on film, when you load it wrong and two pieces touch and you lose the image. I could pretty much guarantee, I did guarantee everything I did was good.
Yep.
And then because of that, they developed a certain trust, and I could use the cameras. This operation came up and everybody was gone. Everybody was gone. All the guys were gone. They were doing other things. And my boss came over and said, "Do you know how to do this?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Can you do this operation?" I said, "Of course." And that was the beginning of what I wanted to do. I didn't want to work in the dark rooms. I wanted to get out on the street. I wanted to be the one training some of these people that were taking huge risks working for us in how to do it correctly and how to be safe doing it. And, you know, if you're going to take a risk, bring me some nice pictures. Don't make sure you understand how this stuff works. And I started doing that. I started training some of the foreign assets that were working with us.
And there's so many stories in here that we're skipping over that relate to this time period of, you know, going to many places around the world and not only helping assets, but because they have to take pictures of things that we as officers don't have access to. So you need to train them on how to use some of this specialized equipment, but then also checking out a lot of sites to see if we ever need to do an evacuation from here, or if we ever need to smuggle someone or something through here, what are all the places and the methods we could use? And photography was a part of that, but part of that was just a good operational sense, which you had honed pretty early and developed.
I was just really interested in the work. I mean, you all in this audience know that what we're trying to do is get collect the intelligence, the information on the plans and intentions of our enemies. So from a photographic point of view, we had some assets that had incredible access to the people that knew that information. We wanted to send them in with a camera to take pictures. We developed in my office a camera that fit into a fountain pen, a real ink writing pen that would still write. But also inside that big fat, like a Mont Blanc, like a $600 fountain pen, inside of it was a camera. And inside of the camera was remember the yellow and black Kodak cassettes? Well, we had our version of that, and it was about that big, and it had a piece of film in it about that long that I loaded into that camera in total darkness, making sure that the emulsion was facing out, not in. And then I would, we only gave these to our best agents, the people with access. So imagine someone who could walk up to Putin's desk today and have a conversation with him with a notepad. And he takes out his pen, and Putin's saying, and we're gonna do this, and he's making notes. And then maybe on his desk, maybe there's an agenda, maybe there are minutes from a meeting, whatever is on Putin's desk is of interest to us. So Putin turns his head, someone comes in and distracts him. Our guy has his pen in his hand, just does that. One click of his finger, you get an 8.5 by 11 document. He could get 100 pictures on that little piece of film. That's the film then I would develop with my heart beating, because these people risked everything.
Yeah.
You couldn't screw that film up.
Now, in the Office of Technical Services, which is the overarching organization you were within, you did get the opportunity to learn a lot of other things, right? Some of the technologies you alluded to. We'll skip disguises for now, but we're talking about microdots. We're talking about covert entry, things like this. Talk about that overall experience and the kind of work there, because that gets less attention than the case officer and even the analyst, but all of that collection work and some of the covert action work is enabled by the technical services.
My deputy office director was in our hallways, again in Europe, and stopped me in the hall and said, "So what are you going to do when you get home?" And I'm like, and I thought of a training course that some of our people got. It was very selective who they put in this course. It was a year-long course. They cross-trained us in everything we do, how to make a concealment device, how to drill a pinhole in a wall, how to plaster it over, how to color match without Home Depot anywhere in the vicinity, how to match the colors. So, you know, all of the things that our men did, I learned to do it in 1 year. So you're totally cross-trained. I used to say it was like being a one-man band. You'd show up somewhere overseas in a chief of station's office, checking in, and he'd talk about why he sent for you, and then you'd say, "Is there anything else?" And off you'd go doing all kinds of crazy things. But I did get into that class, and that was the beginning of something that set me apart from a lot of other people. Getting into that class was not really what women did. I know 1, 2, 3 other women that took that course. There were 8 in an office of 1,000 people. 8 people a year got in that course, and getting in it and taking the training and coming out kind of on top of it was everything from enciphered communications to Morse code, to just endless. It was so much fun. And that opened a whole bunch of doors for me. And so, fresh out of that course, I went down to, here we go, I can't say places, Southern Europe. And we had a thing, we had a telephone cutout device on the roof of a building. So one of our assets that needed to call one of our case officers in the building would make their call, and it would actually go to a cement flower pot on the roof, which had our device in it, and that would turn the phone call around and shoot it into our embassy. And it just, everybody had deniability. Well, it stopped working. So the chief of station said, "See what you can do with that." And I thought, well, I can't do anything with that, but I'll go look. I didn't say to him, "I can't do anything with that." I said, "I'll go look." I thought, I can't do anything with that. So I couldn't. I mean, it was in a big cement flower pot, and I knew what was wrong. It had happened once before. It was the vibrations from the traffic in that city. And this was all line of sight, and it's very easy for it to get, off. And so just out of frustration, I kicked it. And I went back to the station, and the chief of station said, "Nice job, I fixed it."
Sometimes you just need to kick something. It's a flower pot, it's someone's ass, whatever you need to get the job done, you did it.
I learned on that trip, luck over skill anytime. It was one of my mantras, yeah.
So there's someone that we haven't mentioned yet. Larry introduced him, and that's Tony. Before you ended up marrying Tony and living with him and writing books with him and having movie premieres with him, he was in the office and became one of those champions. He was somebody who, as a career development officer, was actually looking out for you and giving you and other women opportunities at a time when many, many other people didn't. So talk a little bit about that, about what he did, how he was looking out for the best talent regardless of who the person was.
You really said that. That was the thing that separated him from, it was one of many things, but he did look after the women, the professional women that were trying to move up. And I was one of them. I told him later, after I married him, I said, "If I had known that I was going to marry you, I would have been so much nicer over all those years." Yeah, Tony was, we kept bumping into each other. we didn't really work together, but he was a good person to sit down with, and if you had an issue or a problem, and say, "What do you think?" and he'd give you some advice. I had gone out to the subcontinent and spent a summer, 3 months, filling in for one of our TOPS officers. That's one of these broadly trained people. And I got out there and I just loved it. I really, really fell in love with that area of the world. And came back and talked to Tony, because he was my career management officer then. And I said, I would like an assignment out there. I mean, I would like to go live there, work there, travel from there. And he said, there's no photo job for like 3 years. Nothing will open up. He said, the only thing opening up is disguise. So I said, well, train me in disguise. Come on, I can do disguise. I'm thinking, how hard can disguise be? What, cut a wig and glue on a mustache? I can do that. Oh, disguise is so much more than that. But they did it. I was like a year and a half in an intense training program, and I ended up going out to that part of the world and having the best assignment ever, just the best assignment ever. That was not a smart thing to do. That was you don't change your profession in the middle of your career and just take a hard right like that. That would generally, I think, not be a good idea. It was the best idea, though, that I ever had, and it just worked out wonderfully.
Talk about the operational purpose of disguises a bit, because there is Hollywood mythology out there. Sometimes it gets it right, and then there's the other 99 out of 100. But there are different reasons why a disguise would be useful, both for agency officers and for assets. Talk through a few of those and why having a disguise that's beyond just a simple wig and a glued-on mustache matters.
How much time do we have?
Hours.
When I started working in disguise, you have to remember that most of the people I was working with were men. There were very, very few female operations officers. And operations was the part of CIA that I was in. It was the part I was interested in. Women in analysis have done rather well. Women in cyber today are doing okay. I mean, professional women at CIA are not all tied up in knots. But in the operational arena, it was the hardest place to make headroom, because the men just didn't want us in that part of the work. Okay, so disguise. Well, disguise during my career completely changed. It started out as a nice to have kind of tool, but a lot of men didn't want anything to do with it. They didn't want to wear a wig. They didn't want you to glue anything on them. They didn't think they needed any of that stuff. They could do the job, thank you very much, just as they were. If a U.S. Marine walked in my office, I wouldn't even try. I mean, I did, but they didn't. And they'd say, oh, yeah, I'll wear that wig. Yeah, that mustache. I love that mustache. I'll put that on if things go wrong. But you kind of knew that they probably weren't going to use their disguise materials that much. During my career, things changed when terrorism came forward and when narcotics, as a counter-narcotics target, came forward. And all of a sudden, we're dealing with a different category, different quality of people. And our officers are very often in danger. And disguise can become, and did become, a form of body armor, personal protection. It could keep you from getting shot. It can also keep somebody from following you home to see it. Did you have a wife? Do you have a dog? Do you have kids? How do you drive to work every day? Getting set up for all kinds of scenarios. It became a more dangerous place. The narcotics thing was really scary. There was so much, probably still is, money involved, that people would do anything to keep those pathways open. With terrorism, you were dealing very often with religious fanatics, and they'd shoot you anytime. So our people, say, going down to Latin America, they all wanted to look like Latin Americans, which is not a hard thing to do. It really isn't. Some brown contacts, a dark wig, a couple of days in the sun. Be nice if you could speak some Spanish. But we could manage that. And with the terrorism thing, it just really was dangerous, and people would get killed just for just for being a foreigner in the wrong part of the country. So the work took on a lot more weight as far as I was concerned, and we put a lot more money into it. I eventually, when I went back and became chief of disguise, we started fast forwarding some programs that we'd had in the works for a long time. We also started working with the magic community out in Hollywood. And a lot of people don't really make that connection, thinking, what would they have for us? But if you think about it, we weren't interested in the magicians. We were interested in the magic builders. The people that their profession is to build deceptions and illusions. They're the ones that make you crazy when you watch these shows on stage and you say, that is not possible, what I just saw. How can that be? Well, that's what they do. They create that. The magic builders were very helpful to us in our work in Moscow, where surveillance was the issue. It was just out on the street. Our operations officers couldn't get anywhere, couldn't do anything. We were being smothered in this embrace by the surveillance, whether you were in a car or on the street or in your apartment, they were in the walls, or if you were in the embassy, they were probably sitting next to you doing the Cyrillic typewriter and doing the logistics kinds of things. So the challenge there was how to get the work done with surveillance swirling all around you all the time. They were trying to shut us down, and they were shutting us down.
Yeah.
So I think you've gone through the book and you read a couple of the ideas that came out of it. What should we talk about?
Yeah, one of the great ideas is just like the rolling car meetings, when you have somebody who gets into or out of a car for a quick meeting.
Oh, yeah.
And you can turn a corner and suddenly they're a different person. And it's not because they had a quick personal change, it's because of something you developed.
It's because of the Jack in the Box, a jib was called. Tony and a friend of his, they were in southern India, cities outside somewhere having beers, and they drew it on a napkin. That was the beginning of it. The jib, the Jack in the Box, was a pop-up dummy to replace the passenger. So you knew you had cars behind you in Moscow, and they'd give you just a little bit of room because they knew where you were going, probably. They thought they did. Yeah. So you could you could do a right turn, you could do another right turn and create what we called a gap. And a gap would be like 8, 10, 12 seconds is all you needed. And this was choreographed to a fairly well when we did it. But surveillance is comfortable because you haven't ever done anything really hinky that they got them nervous. And you make the turn, the second turn, the passenger, who has probably changed his clothes, and he might put on a hat or take off a hat, but he's out of the car. So you've got 8, 9 seconds before surveillance comes around the corner. The driver picks up an attaché case on the floor, sets it on the passenger seat, pushes the button, this dummy pops up. And the dummy looks just like the guy that just got out of the car. He's wearing the same clothes, he's got the same hair. We got really sophisticated with this. Even if they drove up beside you, the dummy could turn its head and look and turn its head back because the driver had a squeeze device. But on the way to building that, we had some failures, and we before we took it to Hollywood, we tried doing it ourselves. So in Washington, D.C., we had these two brothers that were engineers. They were geniuses. They were such nerds. They were nerds before nerds. Their pants were too short, and they carried lunch buckets to work, and they were just two really genius guys, but crazy. We sent them to Al's Magic Shop down by the White House, 16th Street, to buy sex dolls. Plastic party dolls. I don't know. They're inflatable. And so they said, well, how many? We said, maybe 6. Because we don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to start with that. And we only needed the top half to put into the briefcase. And then we had canisters of compressed gas. And so initially you would just put it on the seat and you'd push the button and the compressed gas and the doll would pop up. But we sent the first one that we tried overseas, some wife in an Eastern European country, we asked her to test drive the jib, the Jack in the Box. So she did that, and she had it on the seat, and she's out in the country or something. and she hits the button, and the thing comes up, and it exploded. It shattered because the gas that came out was so cold, ice cold. And she was made, I guess, of some really, really cheap plastic or something. She blew up. So that's when we took our idea to Hollywood. What they invented was just gorgeous. Oh, the other thing about the one we did, the ones that didn't blow up and actually were in the car and they were up, getting them to go down was kind of hard. And they became like those things outside of car dealerships, but they didn't want to get back in the briefcase. So we went out to LA and they looked at what we had and they said, no. And they invented this scissor mechanism. It was so elegant. It was nothing. It was just a scissor and it just came up and it went down. There's no gas. The last time I saw or heard about the jib was in this book called The $1 Billion Spy by Hoffman. Mm-hmm. It's like on page 3, because there's an operation and they're using our jib. And that jib was in the back seat with 2 wives, front seat were two guys. Does this resonate with the women in this room? Women in the back, guys in the front. And one of the women had a birthday cake. And they'd been on the phone all day in Moscow about, the birthday party, we're going to the birthday party. So the KGB is listening to the phones, and they're expecting 2 wives, 2 husbands be in a car going to the birthday party. And they got in the car, and they did the 2 rights. The guy in the front seat got out. The wife hands the birthday cake through the opening. The driver pushes the button. The dummy pops up, and it's just so cool. And that's how they met a really, really important asset at CIA. They had been unable to meet him, but because of that night, they were able to meet him. So that's one of the things that the magic builders did. Yep. For instance, fool the eye. How do you fool the eye? Well, they know how to do that.
One other technology I want to talk about before we get some questions is the SAM, the semi-automated mask, and the technology that was developed to allow something that at this distance would be almost indistinguishable from reality. Now up close, 18 inches away might be tough, but certainly at this distance, that's different, right, than a simple wig. You can still look at somebody and get to it.
Yeah.
But with the semi-automated mask, it was different. Talk about what the SAM was and how useful it was, and then we'll get to a particular time that you wore it.
The SAM was a half mask. Mm-hmm. And we had to take whoever the recipient was, put him in a barber's chair, lean him back, cover his face with an alginate material, like getting a dental impression, without stopping him breathing. Some people had trouble doing this, so we used straws. And we'd get an impression of his face. When you got done, you'd take it off, and they'd all say, that eyebrow's different than that. Once you get a still model of your face, it's amazing, because it doesn't look like you think it looks in the mirror. So they would get over that. We would just make the top half. It did not animate, but it looked really good. And the fit around the eyes was, you couldn't see that there was something fake there. But it stopped, and then there would be a beard. There would always be a beard. That was the only way we could do it.
But it allows the person to talk in their voice, which with its full mask you can't do well.
Yeah, well, it's your own voice, and so it had. We used it a lot. That's as good as we could get it, until we got better, and then we made full face masks that were animated, and that was the hard part, is the animation. Yeah. So instead of just half, we were making them for men. Keep that in mind. So the beard thing, the man might actually have his own beard. It might work out for him. But when we did full masks, all of a sudden the world opened up what we could do. Full-face animated masks, where I could sit closer than this to you, and you would not know. You couldn't tell. You couldn't see. You could have a conversation. I couldn't laugh hilariously, but I could giggle. And what we could do with those masks and what we did with them was amazing.
Now it's pretty good that you can do that for operational scenarios, but it's not like you could take one of these masks and get past the Secret Service and White House security and get right up to the President of the United States.
Yeah, you could.
So tell us about the time that you did that.
So we did. One of the first prototypes that we made, I was an African-American man. And they did it just so I could show it off because I was chief of disguise. And I showed it to Bill Webster, who was director of the CIA. He loved it. He said, "We'll take it to the White House." I said, I don't think the Secret Service is going to buy me as an African-American man. I don't sound like one. I probably walk like, let's make me another woman just to make sure I don't get arrested at the front door. So we did. We made I turned into a Latina. Her name was Becky. She was very pretty. I wanted to keep this mask when I left. They said no. But wore it in, briefed George H.W. Bent Scrowcroft was there. John Sununu was there. Bob Gates was there. Judge Webster was there.
You're in the Oval Office wearing
like this, briefing him.
Yeah.
Talking, reminding him of the disguises we had done when he was chief of CIA, director of CIA. Took him a folder of pictures of him in disguise. This is like pocket litter. This was just to relax him so he didn't, look too hard. This is what we did when you were there. And he liked that, and he's laughing. I said, so I'm going to show you the best thing we've done since then. I'm wearing it now. I said, I'm going to take it off and show it to you. I did not say it was a mask. And he said, don't take it off. And he got up and he walked around me and he's peering. He's looking for what was it and where did it stop? And, and he sat back down and he said, okay, take it off. So I did that Tom Cruise peel. And I'm holding it up in the air, showing it to him, and the photographer took a picture, and pictures on my wall, pictures in the book. And he's all of a sudden a different person, the president was, than I had ever seen. I always thought he came across kind of flat, sort of bureaucratic, sort of businesslike, and now he's twinkling, and he's smiling, and he's laughing. He's like, oh, that's great, he really liked it. And so I took some pictures. Tony had said when I went in the Oval Office, know the door you go in, make sure you know the door you came in, because you want to go out that door. Because there's another door, it's a broom closet, and there's another door, it's a dining room. And Dr. Crown, one of our guys, went in the broom closet. Tony didn't want that to happen. So, but just one other thing about those masks, just real quickly. Once we could do that, once we could put somebody else's face on your face, we could make your twin. We could make another you. You can go home tonight and think, how would that benefit the United States government? That was one of the great solutions of all time. It's what Hollywood does a lot. When there are things on the stage that you just can't understand how it happened because that person just left, or there are very often two lookalikes on the stage, and we could do two lookalikes, and then we could dance circles around our surveillance because they never knew there was another one. We make 6 of you. We only usually made one more of you, but you could have a very interesting escape. And then you could come back into surveillance and they never knew you were gone. And you could make it last all day. It was a fabulous tool.
You did end up as chief of disguise, and that's a different role because you're not out on the streets doing it. You're not making it. You're managing it. You're trying to lead people. Talk about the difference there and the benefits of it in terms of now being the mentor and pulling other people up, but also the downsides of not getting your hands into it.
I didn't want to be chief of disguise initially. I didn't want to be deputy chief of disguise. My first husband said, "You can tell him that, but kiss your career goodbye." That's an unacceptable response. So we talked about it at some length. Once I became chief of disguise, you're right. You're able to take things forward. You're able to have some of the programs that you've worked on enlarged. You can mentor people. You can help bring others along. That mask program was one of my favorite programs. That was a very expensive and time-consuming process to get it to that sophistication. And having the president sort of weigh in on it didn't hurt. Mm-hmm. Having that picture up all over our offices, gee, we fooled the president. It was interesting at the end. It wasn't something that I went looking for, is what I want to say. But once I was chief of disguise, I enjoyed it, and I feel really good about what we did. I thought all along that the work of disguise was protecting people. And I thought that was important because the people doing the work, my God, there's enough pressure on them already just to get the work done without having to worry about, is somebody going to come through the door? Is somebody going to see through this? Or is my cousin from Eureka, Nevada going to walk by me in an outdoor cafe in Paris and say, Bill, but I'm not Bill? You know, it just got rid of a lot of awkward situations.
Absolutely. If you have questions, please approach one of the microphones on either side, and we'll start taking your questions here. I do want to get personal as you step up and do that and say, how much do you enjoy as a disguise master having a clean slate like this? I mean, how good is it to have
You were my dream.
a man with a shaved head or a bald man as opposed to somebody who unfortunately has a lot of hair?
Yeah, well, we love to see a bald man come through the door because he loved us before he entered the room. He didn't know what we were going to do, but he was thinking probably there's some hair in the recipe. One of my favorite disguises was a chief of station going out, and he was unusual just when he appeared in my doorway. He was a very good-looking man. He was bald, but he still had some of this going on. He had on a denim shirt and jeans and cowboy boots. I didn't see that a lot at headquarters in the building. I mean, he caught my eye. And I thought immediately, well, I know what we'll do with this one. Well, I will just give him some hair. We'll make him so happy. And he will probably use it because he would like it. So I made a very special pattern for him. I made him a really, really good wig. Every hair was hand done. This is not something you buy at Kmart. This is like a $10,000 wig. And so I said, so how will you use it? He said, well, what I think I want to do, he said, I think I want to wear this every day. And when I go in disguise, I'm going to take it off. But he kept going. He said, he was just a natural. I didn't have to tell him that you need to invent a character. We always did this. It's not just how you look. You have to become this other person that wears the disguise and looks like that. He said, I've got some really loud cologne that my wife bought me. I'll wear that. I'll take off my ring. So you'll see that white band where the ring should be, you know, and people will not like. He said, and a gold chain, and some glasses. He said, some just lightly tint, gray tint like in Europe. And he's designing this person in my office. He said, I've got some clothes I hate. I'll wear those. And I saw him once when he was I visited his station, and there he sat in his wig.
Wow.
You can do whatever you want to do with disguise. The last issue I would mention is every male that I disguised in my disguise labs, at the end of it, we'd try it all on, everything. We'd say, so what do you think? They'd say, well, I like it. We'd say, you're going to use it, right? I'm going to use it. But we knew that they wouldn't. They're not going to use it because they're going to be scared of it. So we'd send them to the cafeteria in full regalia with their wig and their mustache. And in disguise, they'd go down to our big cafeteria and have lunch and come back. We'd say, how'd it go? And they'd be, oh my God, nobody knew. I saw all these people I knew, and I'm like, right next to them with my tray in the line, and they didn't know it was it. And then you had a good chance that if they needed it, that they would use it.
Yeah.
That was
Proof of concept.
That was proof of concept.
Yeah. Larry, what do we got?
Is this on?
Not yet. Scream it out.
Okay, I think I'm on now. All right.
You're
So
on.
I'm just monitoring the YouTube channel here for some questions. I'll get to a question, but first I love this comment. I think they're talking about the Jack in the Box. Must be great to use in the HOV lane.
Yeah.
One interesting question is about diversity and the diversity of the employees, particularly over time at CIA and other agencies. In your career field, was there advantages to the diversity of the employees that we had at the agency vis-a-vis other intelligence adversaries who perhaps aren't as diverse?
That's hard to answer. I know that in Moscow, which was always worst case scenario, the KGB assumed that we did not use women because they don't use women. And that's where Marty Peterson made her grand entrance, and that was part of the whole rationale of sending the first female case officer to Moscow. And she was what we called black. She was a black officer. She had nothing to do with the station. She was never seen going in the station. She didn't go to TGIFs at the Marine House with CIA people. She had a whole different group of people. Her life was lived in a very difficult way. Usually, if you're in a station like that, you almost work in teams. There are usually like two of you that can bounce things around. She was on her own, handling one of the most important assets that we had at the time. I don't know that much about women used in other intelligence agencies. I know there was a really good review of this new book that was in the Washington Post when the book came out. I wasn't here, I didn't see it, nobody saved me a copy. But it was Tim Weiner, who is, he was New York Times, he was a journalist, and he used to write a lot about the CIA. And he didn't like the CIA, we thought, and we kind of didn't like him back, because he was very, very critical. He wrote a review about this book, and I quoted him in the book, because Tim had said years ago in writing, he said, other than the United States Marine Corps, there is no other piece of the United States government that treats its women as badly as the Central Intelligence Agency, the Operations Directorate. So I quoted him in the book, and then he did a really good review of the book. So I don't know if those two things are connected, but having him like this book meant a lot to me. And the fact that CIA, Mike Morrell, David Priess, we've gotten some really wonderful reviews from CIA people. I was at AFIO recently with Avril, the DNI, the head of the whole thing. She loved the book. So it's got nothing but good words.
Let me ask a question that relates to how most people come to the issue of disguises in intelligence, and that's the TV show The Americans, because they did a lot of disguise. I see a lot of nods. Many of you have seen the show. If you haven't, at least watch some clips of it, because you'll see, Carrie Russell and her husband in the show, and they will change identities. Almost every episode, there's some version of a disguise that's used. How well do you feel the show represented the use of disguise? And what did they not do with Carrie Russell that they probably could have if they had a different actress?
That's such a good question. I don't know where to begin. I was walking through the Spy Museum a year and a half, 2 years ago, and in the area where it's all cubicles, you can't see anybody, but you can hear them. And somebody said, "Who's watching The Americans?" And I'm just walking through, and I said, "I am." And they said, "The Post wants a final review of the show. You want to do it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." I said, "I'm watching it." I'd seen like 5 episodes. I did not know it had been on for years. I took some annual leave. I did total immersion. I watched it all. And then I wrote a really good review because I really loved the show. Carrie Russell's, her disguises were not good. They just kept changing the color of her hair and her hairstyle. But she's so pretty. And it was always Carrie Russell with a different hairdo, a different pretty hairdo. So she doesn't get any kudos from me, but
Phillips disguises.
Oh my God,
yeah.
He was. I couldn't have done a better job with him than they did. He would not just put on his scrungy wig and those glasses and say, "Hello, Martha," but he became that guy that we wanted all of our guys to do. At CIA, our guys didn't want to look like that. But he was that little gray man. He was the one, if he got on the elevator with you on the 3rd floor and got off on 7, you wouldn't even remember that he'd been on the elevator. He was just invisible. He was brilliant. He was brilliant. So I wrote the review, and I ended up So I was on the phone with Joe Weisberg. I can't remember why.
The creator of the Americans.
I was on the phone and told him, got to tell him how much I liked his show. And then I'm on Zoom with him, and he said, what's that painting behind you on the wall? I said, that's Tony's last painting. He tried to buy it.
Oh,
I said, it's mine.
wow, that's aggressive.
I made a giclée. I sent him a copy of it.
Oh,
He bought it.
nice. Well played.
Thank you.
Larry.
All right, so I know you guys are not bashful, so if any of you in the audience here have questions, I mean, I got a couple more YouTube ones here, but please don't hesitate to get up the microphones. I mean, how often do you get to ask the chief of disguise of CIA some interesting questions, not only about the technical aspects of her career, but I think the incredible success she had in navigating through her career to the level she obtained. In fact, there's somebody on YouTube, I'll just pass along this comment. Kimberly Madden says, thank you for being a pioneer and breaking down walls in the intelligence field. So that's very nice.
Thank you. Thank you for the thank you.
We have somebody named Bryce Christensen who would like to know, what is your favorite item at the International Spy Museum? Is there anything that you would want to direct people to make sure they don't miss when they're at the museum?
Well, there's a whole wall about Argo that's really pretty good.
I thought you might say that.
There's a whole wall about my husband, and actually, Tony was almost in a coma at the end, and they came from the Spy Museum with the whole script of that wall, and sat at his bedside and read all the signage to him. So it's going to be like this. Then there'll be a picture, that passport, that fake passport. So it's one of the last things that he ever learned about. It was just such a powerful presentation. And I can't walk by it without thinking how good they were to do it.
Yeah. Thank you. Please, go ahead.
Hi. When you talk about working with people in Hollywood, did they know what you were doing? Did they have clearances? Did they? Okay, that's
That was
interesting.
fun.
Yeah.
We would have a contractual arrangement with them. They would work with us, and we never talked about it. We worked with a makeup man named John Chambers. He was an Oscar-winning makeup guy out in L.A. And for years, we could not say his name, and we didn't want to. And finally, CIA said, okay, you never know why these decisions are made. Mike Hayden, do you know why they're made? It seems kind of random. It's like now I talk about masks. Never talked about masks before, and all of a sudden, it's okay. But yeah, we would have actual contracts with them, classified contracts.
And are there photographs in your book of
There are.
any of these masks?
There's one from the White House. I think that's the only mask photograph in the book. But there might be some stuff online if you look.
Thank you. This is so interesting.
You're welcome.
I can flash you a preview from here, but you'll barely be able to see it. So that's the teaser for the book. Please.
Hi, I don't know if this okay, the microphone's definitely working. So you mentioned that back then government was ahead of innovation. You specifically mentioning inventing long-lasting tiny batteries. So I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on the innovative landscape today in terms of the commercial sector, quote unquote, catching up?
Well, I think the commercial sector caught up and is racing to the finish line. I mean, they've left us in their dust a little bit. The technology is the issue of the day. Everything from the cameras to the cyber to the AI, it's just endless. I know that it's all treated as a threat, and I'm sure that it is a serious threat. But I know in the office where I worked, the idea always was whatever was the current threat, you sit down and figure out how to use it against them, how to turn the technology back against your enemy. I can't speak to that. I've been gone a long time. Even if I was there, I probably couldn't speak to it because that's not my field of expertise. But it's certainly changed the game, totally, totally.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I think my question is kind of a little bit similar. So I'm concerned about the technology because for intelligence back then, because of the CIA, is famous for human intelligence, and you train your covert agent like with high technology and normal people doesn't have access to. So nowadays, people have phones. Basically, everybody can be a spy. So how does CIA training their covert agent still be a cutting edge front line of the battlefield? That's why I'm kind of curious. And the second part is with AI and technology, and a lot of intelligence products probably can be rely on the big data, AI, and also like the drone and all that. You don't really need human in the field. So how does that?
I disagree with that.
Okay.
I think that's the big answer to your question.
Yes. Yeah.
I think you cannot do I have to speak into my lapel? I think you can't remove humans from the equation. We're asking people to provide us with intelligence that our policymakers need. To get that person to open up to us, it's a human, it's a person to person. I don't know of another way that we've ever found that we can do it. Humans, I think, is integral to what needs to be done. People have to trust you. They have to take a little bit of a risk with you because they're breaking the rules of their own country. They need reassurance. They need somebody sitting across from them telling them that we will protect them, and that if it goes badly, we will go get them and bring them out, and we've done that over and over. Without those kinds of assurances, I'm not sure anybody's going to be stepping forward. A lot of the intelligence that we receive comes from volunteers, from people that we didn't even go out and beat the bushes. They decide that they want to be on this side of the equation, not on that other side. A lot of those people work for something like, get my kids out of here, get my kids to the West in school. You know, it's not always based on money. I don't know how it works without humans in it. And I think a lot of the leaders recently have kind of voiced that same opinion. Gina Haspel was the last one I remember reading some quotes from her. You can't just have pure technology back and forth. It'll fall apart. People are not going to trust each other. People aren't even, this idea about where is the truth, who is the truth, what is the truth. You need someone you know, someone who knows about you and your family. I think human is here to stay.
So do you feel like in the future, the role of like you're the chief of the disguise, like will still play a major role in the future intelligence collection?
I don't know. I can't know. I don't have a need to know anymore, right?
Right.
And nobody will tell me, damn it. Thank you for your question.
That's great.
When you were creating disguises, what was the most difficult thing to counter? Was there like a certain physical feature or element that was just more difficult than others?
People have identifying characteristics and they're very often not even aware of them. I was told enough times that I believed it, that I have this walk. I still don't know what they're talking about, but that they could see me a block away because of the way I walk. People have all kinds of habits, things they do that give them away. So when we were doing disguises, it wasn't just changing a person's face. We would actually have them walk, go clear down the hall, come back. We were examining them for these kinds of things, for identifying characteristics. Then you get our people overseas. I don't know how many of you ever wondered, how do they know over there that you're American when you walk into a French cafe and they put you in that crappy table back in the corner? How do they know when you haven't even said a word to them? Well, they know. You know, it's a list of things that Americanize us that we're totally unaware of, and they are painfully aware of. So, yeah.
Nice. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you so much again for your time this evening. This has been just a wonderful and very interesting conversation. About a million questions ran through my head, but I'll limit it to two. You mentioned that men still are most commonly in disguise, and is that you mentioned for the beard. So is it more of a physical reason why men are better at that type of role, or is it the access that men are provided? And then secondly, what traits make the best case officer?
Whoa. It was mostly men because in the operational arena that I worked in, it was male case officers. There were very few women doing that work. And so I almost never disguised women. And when I was working with foreigners, because we did some disguise with foreigners, the foreign assets, they were always men. I never met a foreign asset who was a woman. So it was just, that's what was on my plate. And your second question was?
What traits would surprise people that make a really great case officer?
Oh, boy. Well, I've got a room full of men that could probably qualify. I could get in trouble on this one. If the president of your class walked in and applied for a job, we just might hire him. The interpersonal skills were so important. Absolutely critical, I think. It's more than that, but that's a really good starting place. We would take these kind of larger than life characters, people that you'd meet them at a party, you'd meet them, I don't know, at some conference, and you just want to be their friend. They're just great people. There are people like that, and we can't teach that. People bring that to us when they apply for jobs. We can teach you languages. We can teach you intellectually how to recruit a person. But people with those large, gregarious kind of personalities are really naturals. And when they come in the door, we like them. Part of the problem, though, is those people in the application process, when we say, oh, by the way, when you do something really wonderful, and we sense that you are a person that will do something wonderful, you can never tell anyone. And that's a bummer. It's a hard thing for those people. It's a hard thing for them to swallow. I talk to lots of high school students that come every year. There's 1,200 coming this summer. I'll meet them 200 at a time, and that's what they want to know. What is the CIA looking for in hiring? Because they're thinking, if I fill out my application, what should I put on it? And I tell them they want languages, they want people who are curious about the world, and a way that they see that is if you've done some travel. And then they want all the intellectual, they want all the educational, they want all of that too, of course. But the kind of person that they're looking for needs to be paying attention to current events and interested in current events, and it just goes on and on. And the agency is so broad. There are all kinds of job categories that have nothing to do with running operations, that have nothing to do with foreign assets. The analytical people, they probably never meet a foreign asset. But I mean, the job they do is so important. So you have to kind of diffuse it when you really look at the breadth of jobs available.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's a great place to work.
Hi. I think it's on. I know you've said that women are more involved in the CIA now and the DIA, the FBI, and several aspects of the government. What advice would you give to the women in this room who are studying to join one of these organizations?
Gosh, I'd give the same advice that I give to the men, kind of along the lines of what we were just talking about. But I think that women, my generation didn't have real expectations. We thought it looked interesting. We'd go in and see what we could hammer together. I think women today I'm from a generation, we didn't even have Title IX. I mean, I go back a ways. Women today, I find, are much more aggressive, are much more focused on what they want. And one of the rules that I came up with while I was working, it was my personal rule, was that I wasn't going to sit around and wait for them to give it to me. I was going to take it, whatever I wanted, not wrestling anybody to the ground, but I was going to go after it and ask to. The CIA was kind of merit-based when I was back there. If you could show them that you could do it, maybe they would let you do it. Today, I think women are a little impatient with some of that. But there was a moment, I put it in the book, I was walking down the hallway by the cafeteria with a new young chemist who had come in to work for us. She was a second generation. Her father had worked for us. And she was just this kind of innocent little looking girl, and we're going to lunch. And coming down the hallway toward us is a man from our office, a guy named Bill, who treated, he was awful. He would see you coming and he would start verbalizing to you what he thought of how pretty you looked and what he'd like to do if he could just get closer to you. So here comes Bill, this very kind of coarse, he was an engineer, like a New York construction guy up on a scaffolding, but he's on the floor and he's coming at you. And he's talking like that. Here's Trish, this young, sweet thing. And she leans over to me and she said, "Who's that?" I said, "That's Bill. He works with us." She said, "Bill?" "Yes." She said, "Bill?" She said, "Bill?" And she said the F word out loud, just yelled it. She said, "F off." And Bill almost dropped dead. No one in the hallways of CIA back then, no one said that word, much less a woman, much less yelled it at him. First of all, he never, ever bothered her or me again. But more importantly, I figured out in that moment, I had always thought that it would change someday. This next generation of young men was going to be hired at the CIA. They were going to be better raised. They were going to be more enlightened. And they were going to treat women better. But what Trish taught me that moment was that the women were going to change it. They weren't going to put up with it anymore. They weren't going to take it anymore, and they were going to speak up. And it had not occurred to me that it was going to be the women that were going to start fixing it. And I think the women have started fixing it.
Thank
Long
you very
answer.
much. Yeah. Larry, over to you.
Well, thank you, Jonna, for joining us. Thanks for enlightening us about your career, about some of the fun adventures you went on along the way. Thanks, David, for another wonderful job at moderating. As mentioned before, we're going to have a reception out here in the hallway. So as we wrap it up here, I'd ask you to please make your way out into the hallway, get yourself food and drink. Jonna is going to set herself up at the check-in table for anybody who has her book and would like to get it signed and have a private word with her. Other than that, our next and final Hayden Center event for the school year is going to be on May the 7th. We are going to be featuring our own Andrew McCabe, who is the co-host of a podcast with a woman named Allison Gill. The podcast is called Jack, a special counsel podcast, and it examines all the ins and outs of the criminal and civil cases that are facing our former president. They're going to focus on those cases and particularly drill in on the case associated with the classified document retention down at Mar-a-Lago. So please look to sign up for that event. We think it's going to be pretty popular, so if you want to be in here in the auditorium in the audience, sign up sooner than later.
I want to come to that event.
Yeah, please do. Should be a lot of fun. If you've not listened to the podcast, check it out. They take a very informative yet at times irreverent approach to the subject. So with that, again, one last round of applause for our guests, and we'll see you out in the hall.
Thank you, David.